think they took it a little bit too far for what happened, and he was obviously duped into that by other parties. Welcome to Northwoods Kindred. I'm your Gothi Bodvar, and on this channel we discuss all things asatru Kindred related. So hit that subscribe button if you want to see how we do it in the Northwoods. Today we're going to talk about oath breakers. Stick around. So it seems to be all the buzz now. People talking about oath breaking and oath breakers, and it seems like every little thing you say is an oath, apparently to some people. So we're going to talk about oath breaking in the ancient, archaic Nordic sort of a sense, as well as our modern sense, and what that means and what it actually was. So we know that they swore oaths on all kinds of things, and if you don't know that, then there's a video up here where you can go learn about the oath ring and then other ways that people swore oaths back in the day. But it's important to understand that the oaths themselves were just contracts. They were verbal contracts because the majority of people were illiterate. And since these people were illiterate, they couldn't exactly form a written contract. But I want you to look at an archaic oath as a modern contract. So if you were to break your lease agreement, or you break your lease agreement, then there's a penalty written into that agreement that says if you break this oath, this lease agreement, you now have to pay 3 months rent, or some other lease breaking thing that's written into the contract. And that's why I try to counsel people that if you're going to swear an oath, swear your oath with with the loophole that the oath can be broken or dismantled or whatever it needs to be if it can't be fulfilled or if it shouldn't be fulfilled. Just like the case with a car note or a lease agreement or something like that. If you default on your car note, we all know that you're not going to go to jail, most likely. They're just going to take the car. That's part of the agreement, and it's part of that written oath that you signed when you took the car and exchanged it for your payment schedule or whatever it was. Another example of a modern oath sworn on a ring in most cases is a wedding or a marriage, and it was an oath back then as well. They were oaths to each other. But they could get divorced and they could separate and they would split the dowry, or it would go back, and there were a system in place so that if that marriage or that union didn't work out, there was a civil process in order to divide the belongings, and the woman could own land, and all of that stuff was already in place. So it wasn't like every time an oath was broken, large or small, that they would be bound for the lower realms of Helheim and banished from the community into greater or lesser outlawry. That just wasn't the case. It was a simple contract, and the severity of the breaking of that contract warranted the level of I guess discipline that would follow. So it's not like they had jails. Like, they probably jailed people or held them in some sort of confinement for short periods of time, but they certainly didn't have long-term prisons and things like we have nowadays, other than being confined into slavery or into bondage, which was, I guess, sort of that thing, which was absolutely a consequence for financial indiscretion or just being financially irresponsible. You could end up in bondage to pay off your debts or the debts of a family member. You would think that those loans or those contracts would be oaths as well, because nothing was written down. That's why in a lot of cases when they would take their case to the thing, they would have to dispute in front of the Gothi or whoever was presiding over the thing, and they would generally have to come with witnesses, and whoever had the more compelling witnesses was generally the truth teller. But they would, even before then, they would still have to swear an oath on the ring saying that they were going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help them, Frey Njord and the Almighty Ast. And so the oaths were sworn in that respect. And of course, if you broke the oath, then there was most likely some verbal consequence that was stated beforehand. If you break this oath, or if you swear to something that's untrue, this is the consequence. Maybe you'll be outlawed for a year, or maybe you'll be killed or whatever. But that was the only system they had in order to regulate or else people could just willy-nilly go promise a bunch of stuff and then not fulfill it. I think that we put a lot of emphasis on a small thing, on a small oath or a small boast even, if somebody makes sort of an oath in boast or in jest. I think we put too much emphasis on it, and we kind of neglect to think of the contract that they were entering into in those archaic societies versus the contract that they're entering into in modern society. I'm absolutely sure that people sat around the fire and made boasts that they couldn't fulfill, and there were no harm, no foul. They would probably get ridiculed by their comrades, but they would most likely not be outlawed and murdered because they made a boast to go marry some woman that was completely unattainable for them. But I think we're putting a lot of emphasis on it because there's a lot of bravado, tilvahala, gung-ho, asatru stuff that's going on right now. But we really got to think of things. Let's think about things a little bit more academically, and let's look at the sources. And there's very few sources that show where somebody broke an oath and was outlawed and ran down and killed. One being, obviously the saga of Gothi the Outlaw. An oath was broken. I think even in that saga, it's a little bit sensational, and I think they took it a little bit too far for what happened. And he was obviously duped into that by other parties. Read the saga if you don't know what I'm talking about. But the saga of Gothi the Outlaw is probably the most famous saga of breaking an oath, becoming outlawed, and then tragic ends. And even then, that was sensationalized, and it was brought about by a lot of happenings that weren't necessarily Gisli's fault. So he was sort of like entrapped into that sort of a thing, and that same thing can happen in a modern era. So if you've ever watched any of our videos, when we sit down for our kindred meetings, we always swear an oath of frith before the meeting because sometimes things can get heated. But that oath is also set to expire at the end of the meeting. So if there is beef, we can still go outside and settle it without having broke the oath. So I would suggest that when you enter into an oath like it's a modern contract, and set yourself up so that if there is a need to break the contract, that there's an actual way that we've already worked out ahead of time to break that contract effectively without anybody being called an oath breaker or being outlawed from their community or being slandered by people over an oath that's essentially inconsequential to the functioning of a kindred or asatru in general or to the foe. Let me know what you think about oath breakers. Put that down in the comments. And have you ever accidentally or purposely broken an oath, even a small one, or said you were going to do something and didn't fulfill that boast? So I just wanted to make this quick video to answer a question on my Discord, and then put it in a format that I could actually share out to some of our other social media pieces and parts, because I know that this topic is actually a hot topic right now in the community. I don't know why. Maybe somebody that was famous in the community broke an oath or boasted about something they didn't do, and the whole community is coming down on them. It seems to work like that. But whatever the reasoning is, this seems to be a hot topic. That's my take on it. An oath is just an ancient version of a modern contract. That was the way that an archaic people who were largely illiterate, that's the best system that they could put into place to make a civil contract and enforce it with some kind of a consequence if it was broken. Nowadays we have a legal system, we have a justice system, we have rules, we have bylaws in our kindreds, we have written contracts, and then lastly we can swear these little oaths in small occasions, and they are certainly able to be, if not broken completely, certainly negotiated. So at least build in room for negotiation. If you don't build a loophole into it, build in room for negotiation, because nobody wants to be an oath breaker. It's a very bad slander, even though it probably doesn't mean as much as some people put emphasis on it. So with that, just know that if an occasion comes up where you have had to swear an oath and you couldn't fulfill it, like your kindred, maybe your kindred dissolved and you had oathed to be a strong member of the kindred for the rest of your life, but the kindred dissolved, well, that oath is broken. Just know that that doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. You're still you. You're still loved. You're still appreciated, and you're still valued in this community, regardless of whether or not an oath was intentionally or unintentionally broken. It has to be measured by the value of the oath and the damage that it does to the people around. Not every word holds the same weight as another. So We love you. We respect you just the same. Welcome to our community. I hope to see you around, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do so, and I'll see you on the next video. Hail.